Throughout history, kings, presidents, magnates, and even religious leaders have undergone secret ceremonies before reaching their positions of power. These are not mere symbolic traditions or harmless rituals. These oaths represent deep, often unbreakable commitments that determine not only the fate of those who take them but also that of millions of people around the world. If these vows are merely part of the protocol, why are they kept in absolute secrecy, hidden from public view? What exactly do these oaths require, and more importantly, whom do they truly serve? Since the dawn of civilization, the act of taking an oath has always been tied to power. Rulers, priests, and warriors sealed their loyalty through solemn vows, often accompanied by complex rituals that not only secured their position but also bound them to unseen forces. But why were these oaths so essential? Did they merely serve to strengthen bonds of trust, or did they conceal far deeper commitments? In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were not just kings, they were considered living gods. But before being crowned, they underwent a ceremony known as the opening of the mouth, a mystical ritual that, according to ancient texts, allowed direct communication with the gods. This ritual, performed by highly trained priests, not only ensured the new ruler's legitimacy but also symbolized his submission to the deities that governed the empire. Moving forward in time, we find the Roman emperors, who were often initiated into the mysteries of Mithras, an esoteric religion whose rites involved immersion in bull's blood and vows of eternal loyalty to hidden forces. Mithraism was not just a spiritual belief, it was an underground power structure where only the initiates knew the true purposes behind the ceremonies. Many of Rome's generals and politicians were members of this sect, raising the question: who really ruled the Roman Empire? The emperors or those who controlled the hidden mysteries? During the Middle Ages, the Knights Templar became one of the most powerful organizations in Europe. Officially, they were warrior monks devoted to protecting Christian pilgrims, but historical documents indicate that their initiation rituals involved pagan symbols and practices that even shocked the Catholic Church. Accused of heresy, witchcraft, and the worship of mysterious entities such as Baphomet, the Templars were persecuted and exterminated. But did their influence truly vanish, or did it simply evolve into something even more discreet? Centuries later, in 18th century Bavaria, an organization emerged that would forever change the way secret pacts were made: the Illuminati. Founded by Adam Weishaupt, this secret society recruited members from the intellectual and political elite, demanding from them an oath of absolute secrecy. But their agenda went beyond simple philosophical gatherings. The Illuminati sought to reshape the world according to their principles, infiltrating governments, universities, and religious institutions. When the society was officially dissolved, many believed its influence had ended. But would an organization so powerful truly disappear without a trace? In modern times, the practice of secret oaths has not only continued but has become even more sophisticated. In politics, economics, and even entertainment, high-ranking figures are frequently associated with secret societies that demand extreme vows of loyalty. Skull and Bones, for instance, is a fraternity at Yale University that has counted George W. Bush and John Kerry among its members. Its initiation ritual includes a pledge of total secrecy, along with symbolic practices involving coffins and skulls. What really happens inside these societies? Another intriguing example is the Bohemian Grove, an exclusive club where presidents, billionaires, and business leaders participate in strange rituals, including the so-called cremation of care, in which an effigy representing a human figure is burned before a giant owl statue. While participants claim it is merely theatrical, the fact that such ceremonies are kept in total secrecy raises inevitable questions. What are these men truly swearing to? Looking at history, it becomes clear that oaths are not just formalities. They create commitments, define alliances, and, above all, establish an invisible chain of command where the real decision-makers remain hidden from the masses. But what about the Bible? What does it have to say about secret pacts and promises? The Bible is filled with passages that warn about the power of oaths and pacts. In many cases, these spiritual commitments were responsible for changing the destiny of individuals and even entire nations. But why would a simple vow or alliance have such an impact? The answer may lie in the very nature of the oath itself. By speaking certain words, a person not only makes an external commitment but also submits their soul to forces that may be far beyond their understanding. In the Old Testament, one of the most intriguing examples is the pact of the Gibeonites with Joshua. In Joshua 9, the Gibeonites, fearing the destruction of their people, deceived the Israelites by pretending to be from a distant land. Joshua and his leaders, without consulting God, made an oath of eternal protection. Later, upon discovering the deception, it was too late. The pact was sealed, and breaking it would bring a curse upon Israel. This episode highlights something that continues to this day. Many alliances are made without proper discernment, and once signed, they become unbreakable, regardless of the circumstances. How many modern leaders take oaths without knowing their real consequences? Another fascinating case is that of Saul and Jonathan. In 1 Samuel 14, Saul, in a moment of impulsivity, swore that anyone who ate before the battle ended would be cursed. Jonathan, unaware of his father's vow, ate honey along the way and was condemned to death. The army had to intervene to prevent his sacrifice. This event reveals a chilling aspect of oaths. They do not only affect the one who makes them but also those around them. Now think, if a simple rash vow by a king had the power to nearly cost his own son's life, what about the oaths made by today's rulers and elites? In the New Testament, Jesus issued a direct warning about oaths, one of the few moments in which he condemned something in absolute terms. In Matthew 5:34-37, he says, "Do not swear at all, neither by heaven nor by earth. Let your yes be yes, and your no, no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." Here, Christ not only warns against making absolute promises but also reveals an important detail. Oaths can have an evil origin. If this is true, could the pacts made in today's secret societies be binding the powerful to unseen forces? Another often overlooked point is how the religious leaders of the time used oaths to manipulate and control people. In Matthew 23:16-22, Jesus criticizes the Pharisees for creating elaborate rules about which vows were valid and which could be broken. They used this logic to trap people in heavy obligations while finding loopholes to escape their own commitments. Isn't this exactly the same pattern we see today, where politicians and powerful figures make public promises while fulfilling secret pacts among themselves? In the book of Revelation, hidden oaths appear in an even more symbolic way. Revelation 13 speaks of a power system that demands absolute loyalty, a global dominion where no one can buy or sell without accepting the mark of the beast. This passage can be interpreted as an allusion to invisible power structures operating through behind-the-scenes commitments. What happens when an oath is not just a promise but a complete submission to a system that governs the world? From a psychological perspective, we can see that oaths also serve as a form of mental control. When a person makes a solemn pact before witnesses, or worse, before a spiritual entity, their mind accepts the idea that they are now bound to something greater than themselves. This mechanism has been widely used throughout history, both by religions and secret societies, to ensure absolute obedience. And what if this same principle is being used today in an even more sophisticated manner? The Bible's warnings make it clear that not every pact is benign. If an oath can spiritually bind a person to a force or system, this means that leaders participating in closed societies are pledging their loyalty to something that is not visible to the public. And more than that, they may be compromising the fate of nations without us knowing. With so much evidence and so many warnings, the big question arises: do the powerful of today take oaths merely as traditional rituals, or are they consciously committing themselves to hidden forces that shape the destiny of the world? Since the dawn of civilization, those who ruled have always sought ways to ensure that their power remained intact. While kings and emperors imposed their authority by force, the true structures of control were established through closed societies, where loyalty pacts are more important than any constitution or public ideology. These organizations do not merely create leaders, they also determine which decisions can or cannot be made on the global stage. But how do these groups operate, and what is the true extent of their influence? Contrary to popular belief, secret societies are not all the same. Some have a purely philosophical and symbolic character, while others function as invisible boards of directors for the world. Among them, some control specific sectors such as the economy, politics, and even culture. If we observe the rise of major corporations, governments, and doctrines throughout history, we can identify clear patterns that always lead back to the same power structures. This means that these societies not only recruit future leaders, but also decide who can or cannot reach the top. The Skull and Bones, for example, is not just a university fraternity, it is an elite recruitment system. Founded in 1832 at Yale University, This organization has an impressive track record of former members who have become presidents, secretaries of state, and CIA directors. It is no coincidence that both George W. Bush and John Kerry were bonesmen, and that, in the 2004 U.S. presidential election, the two candidates belonged to the same secret society. The strangest part? Neither of them has ever openly spoken about their connections to the group. If the purpose was merely academic networking, why so much secrecy? Beyond groups directly linked to politics, there are orders that operate within religious structures. The Jesuit order, founded in 1534, not only profoundly influenced the Catholic Church but also played a direct role in shaping monarchies and empires over the centuries. Its members take an oath of absolute obedience to the Pope, but behind the scenes, there is evidence that their agenda goes far beyond faith. With close ties to European high finance, the Jesuits have been accused multiple times of manipulating political events to shape the world according to their interests. If religious groups have intervened directly in governments in the past, could they still be doing so today? Another curious organization is the Order of the Knights of Malta, which holds diplomatic status and has influential members in strategic sectors. Although it is officially a Christian charitable order, its membership list includes figures connected to military intelligence, European aristocracy, and major international banks. If the order's official mission is humanitarian, why does it maintain such close relations with global geopolitics? But perhaps the most enigmatic group is the Bilderberg Club, an annual gathering where political leaders, business tycoons, and academics discuss the world's future without any media coverage. Founded in 1954, the club has hosted guests such as Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, Angela Merkel, and members of the British royal family. The most intriguing detail? No participant is allowed to disclose the content of the discussions. Why does the global elite meet in secret to decide global issues with zero transparency? If the influence of these societies were not concerning enough, there is also a symbolic element that connects them. Many of these groups use ancient rituals and symbols that trace back to the civilizations of Babylon, Egypt, and Canaan. At Bohemian Grove, for instance, world leaders participate in the cremation of care, a ceremony where a symbolic human figure is burned before a giant owl statue. Officially, this is merely theatrical, but what compels such powerful men to submit to these rites? Beyond the ritualistic aspect, there is the issue of power dynasties. What many people fail to realize is that these organizations do not merely recruit influential members, they also ensure that certain families remain in control for generations. Families like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Windsors not only possess immense wealth but also have deep connections to secret societies. In many of these bloodlines, children do not choose their destinies. They are trained from an early age to assume strategic positions. Is this power merely economic, or is there an invisible structure of control ensuring the continuity of these dynasties? Another strategy employed by these societies is controlling the public narrative. While meetings take place in secret, the general population is distracted by irrelevant news and fabricated crises. The media, often controlled by the same groups that convene at the Bilderberg Club and other organizations, dictates what should be debated and what should be ignored. If these societies were merely harmless networks of influence, why go to such lengths to keep their affairs hidden from the public? The most unsettling question is that these hidden alliances do not operate solely within politics and economics. They shape the very reality we live in. If the most powerful people in the world are bound by oaths of loyalty to these organizations, what does that mean for those outside the system? Are we living in a society where the most crucial decisions are made by a small group of individuals following a code the rest of the world is unaware of? If history teaches us anything, it is that true power is never where it appears to be. What we see on the surface, elections, public policies, economic trends, is just the tip of the iceberg. What truly governs the world remains hidden, protected by oaths that can never be broken. But if these pacts are so powerful, what happens to those who dare to challenge this invisible structure? When looking at the most powerful people on the planet, CEOs of megacorporations, bankers, political leaders, and media moguls, the impression is that each carved their own path to the top. But the truth is that these figures share more than just wealth and influence. They belong to a closed circle where hidden pacts and commitments determine who rises and who falls. More than ambitious individuals, they are pieces within a system that operates behind the scenes, shaping the course of humanity. But who sets these rules? And whom do these leaders truly serve? To understand this phenomenon, we must analyze how these elites interact. In nearly every strategic sector, economy, technology, energy, healthcare, and entertainment, the decision-makers belong to interconnected networks that operate outside the bounds of democracy. Forums such as the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, and the World Economic Forum, WEF, are not just diplomatic meetings. They are gatherings where global policies are crafted and where the influence of sovereign nations is sidelined. The most intriguing part? These meetings have been taking place for decades, and many of the changes that impact society were decided long before the public ever became aware of them. A clear example of this is the 2008 financial crisis. While millions of people lost their homes, jobs, and savings, banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, whose executives attend Bilderberg meetings, received billions in bailouts. The result? While ordinary citizens bore the brunt of the collapse, the banking elites grew even richer through the very system they helped create. If these groups were merely advisory councils, how can we explain such a perfect alignment between their discussions and global events? But the most concerning part is not just what they decide, it is how these decisions are implemented in a seemingly unavoidable way. Many of the billionaires and political leaders who participate in these meetings are directly involved in major social and technological shifts that reshape our daily lives without our input. Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, is one of the primary advocates of the so-called Great Reset, an initiative proposing a complete restructuring of the global economy, where governments, corporations, and technology will control every aspect of human life. When such monumental changes are discussed by a small group of unelected individuals, can we truly say we live in a free society? Another crucial aspect is how these elites protect each other. In recent years, multiple scandals have surfaced, revealing dark connections among powerful figures. The most emblematic case was that of Jeffrey Epstein, a billionaire involved in an international human trafficking network who had direct ties to political leaders, royalty, and tech magnates. When Epstein was arrested, investigations began uncovering shocking details about his influence, but before he could testify, he mysteriously died in his cell. Coincidence, or a warning to those who dare to break the code of silence? This elite protection extends to the media and the judicial system. Major media conglomerates are owned by billionaires who frequent the same circles of power, ensuring that certain topics are never widely discussed. Investigations into corruption schemes, financial manipulation, and fraudulent deals are silenced before they can cause real impact. Even the tech sector plays a role in this control. Companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter have close ties to governments and investment funds that dictate what information is available to the public. If something threatens the existing power structure, it simply disappears from the spotlight. But perhaps the most enigmatic aspect of this elite is not just its influence over governments and economies, but its involvement with esoteric and spiritual concepts. Many of these leaders use symbols and practices that trace back to occult orders of the past. The very logo of the World Economic Forum, a circle intersected by a line, bears a resemblance to Masonic symbols, while the all-seeing eye appears on official documents of financial institutions like the Federal Reserve and the World Bank. Could the global elite be following some sort of secret philosophy guiding their actions? In the speeches of some of these figures, the idea of a new global paradigm frequently emerges. In 1991, then U.S. President George H.W. Bush stated, "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is a major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order." This statement not only suggests that global events may be planned, but also implies that crises are used as tools to accelerate specific agendas. Wars, pandemics, and financial collapses may, in reality, be mere mechanisms to further consolidate elite power. And so, the inevitable question arises: if world leaders and billionaires are part of a global network operating in the shadows, are their decisions truly their own, or are they merely following orders from something far greater and more obscure? No pact is made without a price, and no oath is sworn without the promise of a reward. But what exactly do the powerful receive in exchange for their absolute loyalty? Wealth and influence may seem like obvious answers, but the true bargain these individuals make goes far beyond what is visible. If these commitments shape not only their careers but also the very fate of the world, what makes this power so valuable? And what does it demand in return? To understand this mystery, we must distinguish between ordinary billionaires and the truly initiated. Many entrepreneurs amass fortunes, but only a select few gain entry into the closed circle of those who actually set the rules of the game. The difference between a magnate and a true member of the global elite is not just their bank balance, but what they are granted: unrestricted access to control entire systems. Governments, financial markets, global security structures, and even social movements can be guided by unseen hands, without the masses ever realizing it. One of the most effective ways to ensure this domination is through controlling the perception of reality. New ideas, technologies, and behavioral shifts are introduced so gradually that they become unquestioned norms. Take, for example, the rise of digital currencies and the centralization of the financial system. The concept of a cashless society, where all transactions are monitored and authorized by banks and governments, is already well into its implementation phase. But this shift was not organic. It was deliberately planned and introduced over time until it became a necessity accepted without resistance. Who controls this process? And more importantly, who benefits from it? Beyond the dominance over global systems, an even more enigmatic factor seems to unite this elite: their connection to unseen forces. Throughout history, kings, generals, and emperors have sought not just political advice but also spiritual guidance from obscure sources. Egyptian pharaohs were initiated into esoteric mysteries. Roman emperors participated in secret cults devoted to Mithras, and even modern rulers have been documented consulting astrologers and mediums for strategic decisions. Ronald Reagan, for example, relied on the astrological predictions of Joan Quigley to shape his political agenda. If national leaders turn to such practices, is it irrational to think that even more powerful figures do the same? The presence of occult symbolism in global events and financial institutions suggests that this connection still exists. The all-seeing eye, found on the US dollar bill and numerous corporate logos, traces back to ancient traditions claiming that true power comes from alliances with forces beyond human comprehension. The use of specific archetypes, such as Moloch and Baphomet, in ceremonies and media productions raises an even deeper question. Are these symbols merely aesthetic choices, or are they constant reminders of a commitment these elites must uphold? But perhaps the most intriguing question is not what they gain, but what they lose in return. How often have we seen public figures begin their careers as idealistic and charismatic, only to become cold, calculating, and entirely different years later? Is this merely a natural consequence of ambition and power, or is there something within these pacts that alters the very essence of these individuals? Then comes the darkest detail of all: the cost of leaving. Countless cases exist of individuals who, after reaching the top, attempted to expose the inner workings of this system, only to be swiftly silenced. Jeffrey Epstein, whose circle included billionaires, politicians, and royalty, died under highly suspicious circumstances shortly after his arrest. John F. Kennedy, in a speech just weeks before his assassination, denounced the influence of secret societies in U.S. politics. When someone breaks away from this structure, what really happens to them? Perhaps the true secret of these oaths is not just what they offer, but what they demand in return, something that cannot be undone, not even by death. If these hidden pacts and alliances operate at the top of the global power pyramid, most people might think their influence is distant and irrelevant to everyday life. But nothing could be further from the truth. These control structures directly shape how we live, think, and even react to events that mold our society. However, there is an even more concerning aspect. Most people don't even realize they are part of this machinery. How does this influence manifest in daily life? And more importantly, is there a real way to resist this invisible domination? One of the system's most powerful tools is psychological manipulation through information overload and distraction. Unlike in the past, when control was enforced through brute force, today it operates by creating continuous chaos. Wars, crises, fabricated controversies, and fragmented media narratives ensure that the public's attention is never focused on the real centers of power. While people argue over issues carefully designed to divide society, the decisions that truly impact their lives are made behind closed doors, far from public scrutiny. This method follows an ancient but highly effective principle: problem, reaction, solution. The system creates a problem, such as an economic collapse, an energy crisis, or a public security threat, and waits for the public's reaction, driven by fear and uncertainty, to demand a solution. Then, the pre-planned solution is presented as the only possible alternative. But this solution never benefits the people. It benefits those who created the problem in the first place. Just look at recent major events. Financial crises that made billionaires even richer, control laws justified by external threats, and the growing digitization of the economy, which further restricts financial freedom. Beyond these manipulations, there is a deeper and less perceptible aspect of control: psychological and vibrational imprisonment. Constant exposure to alarming news, images of destruction, and narratives of hopelessness creates a low-energy field, keeping people trapped in fear, anger, and powerlessness. And here lies the key issue. A society in a constant state of fear cannot see solutions or react strategically. But is there a real way to resist this system? The answer is yes, but it requires conscious effort. The first step to breaking this cycle is recognizing manipulation patterns and distancing oneself from the overload of misinformation around us. This doesn't mean ignoring world events, but rather developing a critical perspective on the narratives presented to us. Who really benefits from a given crisis? What interests are behind major economic and social shifts? And most importantly, why are certain topics amplified while others are completely silenced? Another essential step is seeking concrete ways to achieve independence, especially in economics and technology. If the global financial system is becoming increasingly centralized, then decentralized alternatives must be explored. Independent cryptocurrencies, self-sufficient communities, and survival knowledge outside the traditional system are not just resistance strategies. They may become the only viable options in a future where individual freedom is a privilege, not a right. But the greatest form of resistance may lie in something these groups have tried to conceal for centuries: the spiritual power of the individual. If these elites make hidden pacts, perform loyalty rituals, and follow philosophies that transcend materialism, then that means something beyond the physical world influences power. So why is this knowledge accessible only to a select few? Could true liberation from global control lie in rediscovering this lost connection? Many spiritual traditions speak of awakening consciousness as the only way to break free from the world's illusions. If the planet's true leaders operate under occult principles, it is possible that their greatest strategy for control has been to disconnect the population from spiritual knowledge and the understanding of their own inner power. If history teaches us anything, it is that no empire lasts forever. But the question few are prepared to face is this: what if the real challenge is not the collapse of this system, but our ability to live outside of it? The greatest illusion created by this system was making people believe they are weak, dependent, and incapable of shaping their own destiny. But the truth is that resistance does not begin with massive revolutions. It begins with the individual. Questioning, understanding, seeking independence, and, above all, reclaiming the connection to what has been hidden are the first steps to breaking this cycle. In the end, the real question is not just who controls the world, but who is ready to take back control over their own existence. If you're interested in exploring more about spirituality, I've specially selected some videos filled with deep knowledge and fascinating discoveries that you'll love. Just click on one of them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual learning. Your commitment to knowledge is the first step toward transforming your reality.